begin by addressing you first as Americans, deliberately to remind us all of our primary commitment as citizens and a recognition of the difficult time which we and all Americans are going through as we gather. And I also do so because at this very moment, men and women in America's armed forces are engaged in conflict thousands of miles from our shores. They're risking their lives to defend us and to defend freedom. They deserve and they will receive our full and wholehearted support, whatever one's views about the policies of our nation. Please join me in thanking them, especially the sons and daughters of Maine, for their courage and their dedication. My mention about Joe Brennan and my appointment to the Senate reminds me of the story of doing that, and in the hopes that there are 2 or 3 people in the room who haven't heard it. I want to repeat it. I was a federal judge at the time, and I'd only been appointed the year before, so it was unlikely that I would be considered for appointment to the Senate. And when Joe called me to tell me that he wanted to appoint me, I told him that I had to think about it. It was a surprise, and federal judges are appointed for life. I knew that my prospects were not high in a long career in the Senate. I said, I've got to call my brothers. Now, as you know, I grew up in Waterville. I have 3 older brothers, all great athletes. One of them, my brother Paul, is here this evening. I came along, and I was not as good an athlete as they were. In fact, I was not as good as anybody else's kid brother. And so very early in my life, I became known in Waterville as Johnny Mitchell's kid brother, the one who isn't any good. As you might expect, I developed a massive inferiority complex and a very highly competitive attitude toward my brothers. And I suffered in their shadow for most of my life. So when I hung up with the governor and called them, ostensibly to seek their advice, I confess that there was a note of triumphalism in my voice. I said to them, the governor has just called and wants to appoint me to the United States Senate. What do you guys think of that? They responded in a predictably negative way. Brother Johnny said, everybody knows you're a born loser. I can't understand how you get to be a federal judge, so you better stay there for a lifetime job. My brother Paul, who is the eldest, the most thoughtful, as usual, elevated the conversation to a higher plane. He said, the people of Maine deserve a qualified person. So I hung up the phone, I called the governor, and I said, Joe, I've received all the reassurance I need. My ability to serve in this position, I accept, and I'll be there tomorrow. And so I've never looked back, but I'm pleased to say that my brothers have gotten over it. My brother Paul is there, and I thank him again for all of the advice, counsel, and inspiration that he gave me in my life. I do want to say a few words First, as I said, as Americans, and then after that, a few words as Democrats. In 1787, a small group of American colonists gathered in Philadelphia in a constitutional convention. Their objectives were independence and self-governance, and they achieved both. The Declaration of Independence was a powerful statement of the right of free people to govern themselves. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, what we call the Bill of Rights, is the most concise and eloquent statement ever written by humans of the right of the individual to be free from oppression by government. For as long as men and women seek to gain or keep their freedom, the Bill of Rights will stand as their beacon. That's one side of the coin of liberty, the right to be free from oppression. The other side is the need for everyone to have a fair chance to enjoy the blessings of liberty. To a man without a job, to a woman who can't care for or feed her children, to the young people who lack the skills needed to compete in a world of technology. They don't think much about the Constitution or about abstract concepts like liberty and justice. They're focused on survival, on coping day to day. And that's why jobs for Americans must be our nation's highest priority. Our ideals distinguished America from the very beginning, and they appealed to people all around the world. They still do. Our power is necessary and important, but we must never forget that the United States was a great nation long before it was a great military or economic power. It was our ideals that were and are the primary basis of American influence in the world. They're not easily summarized, but surely they include the sovereignty of the people, the primacy of individual liberty, opportunity for every member of society, an independent judiciary, and the rule of law, applied equally to all citizens and to the government itself. We're fortunate to be Americans, to be citizens of what is, despite its many imperfections, the most free, the most open, the most just society in all of human history. I believe in the American dream because I live. When I was a federal judge, I enjoyed every part of the job, but I most enjoyed the occasions when I presided over what are called naturalization ceremonies. They're citizenship ceremonies. A group of people who'd gone through all of the required procedures gathered before me in a federal courtroom in Bangor or here in Portland. There, I administered to them the oath of allegiance to the United States. And by the power vested in me under our Constitution and law, I made them Americans. It was always very emotional for me, because my mother was an immigrant, my father, the orphan son of immigrants. They had no education. My mother could not read or write English. She worked her entire adult life on the night shift in textile mills. My father was a janitor. But because of their efforts, and most importantly, because of the openness of American society, and because I got helping hands from so many people, including some I didn't even know. I, their son, was able to get an education and was able to become the majority leader of the United States Senate. After every ceremony, I spoke personally with each of the new Americans, individually or in family groups. I asked them where they came from, how they came, why they came. Their answers were all inspiring. Almost everyone in this room is an American by accident or birth. Every one of them is an American by an act of free will, often at great risk and cost to themselves and their families. And although their answers were as different as their countries of origin, there were some common themes, and they were best expressed by a young Asian man. When I asked why he came, he replied in slow and very halting English. He said, "I came because here in America, everybody has a chance." Think about the fact that a young man who'd been an American for less than 10 minutes, who could barely speak English, was able to sum up the meaning of our country in a single sentence. America is freedom and opportunity. To me, those 5 words represent the heart, the soul, and the meaning of the Democratic Party. America is freedom and opportunity. So let me speak to you now as Democrats. Our party was founded by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. One wrote the Declaration of Independence, the other was the principal author of the Constitution. So it's no accident that the ideals of our party and those of our nation have been the same for all of our nation's history. And in terms of freedom and opportunity, look at that history. Great as were the men who wrote the American Constitution, they were products of their time, constrained by the society in which they lived, and in which they learned, and in which they worked. So our Constitution, which we rightly revere, originally limited the right to vote to adult white men who owned property. African Americans were not even considered to be persons under the original American Constitution. It took 75 years and the bloodiest war in our history to extend the right to vote to all adult males. It took another 60 years and a bitter political struggle to extend it to women. Then another half century to 18-year-olds. And it was just 2 decades ago that Americans with disability were given the right to live full and meaningful lives. To this day, the struggle continues to expand our definition of citizenship, of the human and civil rights which each American should be able to enjoy. In the effort now to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and to ensure that all Americans, every single one, is treated fairly and equally. You could look at that as a painful record, or you could look at it, as I prefer to, as evidence of the greatness of America. A never-ending search, a never-ending effort to right the wrongs of the past, to enable each generation to be more free and more prosperous than its predecessor. History and humility require us to acknowledge that we Democrats have made many mistakes. But we've often been right, and the result has been opportunity and better lives for many generations of Americans. Now we must build on that record and deal with the challenges of the 21st century with even more optimism, innovation, and energy. I'm proud to be a Democrat because I believe that over the past 2 centuries of our national existence, and continuing to this very moment, no person, no group, no organization has done more than the Democratic Party to open the door of opportunity to every American, regardless of race, or creed, or background, or status. To break down barriers of discrimination, of exclusion, of ignorance, to make it possible for every American to have good health care, good education, and a good job, and to make possible the pride, dignity, and self-respect that comes from being able to care for yourself and for your family. A century ago, 9-year-old boys worked in coal mines, and 10-year-old girls worked in textile mills. We insisted on and enacted child care laws to protect our children. And today, 9-year-old boys and 10-year-old girls are in school where they belong. Three-quarters of a century ago, almost all Americans who reached the age of retirement were doomed to a few declining years of grinding poverty and the loss of their self-esteem. We insisted on and we enacted Social Security, and today millions of our mothers and our fathers depend on it for their survival and for their dignity. A half-century ago, the rising cost of health care overwhelmed many of our senior citizens, leaving them without access to quality or sometimes to any health care. We insisted on and we enacted Medicare, and today, although there are millions of Americans without health insurance, the elderly are not among them. They have Medicare, and we're going to see that they keep it. Just 2 years ago, under President Obama's courageous leadership, we insisted on and we enacted reforms to enable almost all Americans to have health insurance. And not long before that, millions of Americans were denied the most basic right in a democratic society, the right to vote, just because of the color of their skin. We insisted on and we enacted the Voting Rights Act. So today, every American has the right to participate in choosing our leaders. We insisted on and we enacted the GI Bill and Pell Grants to help those who served our country and those in need to get a college education. And under Ed Muskie's leadership, we insisted on and we enacted the Clean Air and the Clean Water Acts, clearing the air and cleaning the water for a better and healthier America. Each of these advances took strong leadership and years of effort by Democrats. Most of them were bitterly and ferociously opposed. They were labeled as socialism or worse. But each was, in fact, a sensible and realistic solution to a serious national problem. That's the Democratic legacy, and that's the Democratic approach. Each of these important actions over time gained the overwhelming support of the American people. And this has led to some amusing flip-flops. The that some of those groups who opposed and attacked Social Security and Medicare now proclaim themselves as their defenders. Nothing better demonstrates the resulting confusion than the man who reportedly got up at a town hall meeting a couple of years ago and insisted that the federal government keep its hands off his Medicare. But while successful, each of these advances also was imperfect, as are all human efforts, requiring constant review and improvement as circumstances change. And they have changed. It is a fact that Social Security in the long term and Medicare in the near term face serious problems. That's happened before. But those problems can be dealt with as they were in the past, by sensible changes that preserve the essential character of both programs. Above all else, to deal with these problems, to deal with the deficit, to deal with the full range of challenges that America faces, we must restrain the rising cost of health care and get more Americans back to work. We have been the most successful political party in American history because we recognize that the best way to deal with our problems is through strong and sustained economic growth. Well, the list of our accomplishments is long, but I can't go on any longer. I think you get the point. So I'll end up by repeating what I said often, and as usual, Mary McElhaney read my mind and stole my line. In America, no one should be guaranteed success, but everyone, every single one, should have a fair chance to succeed. For me, that sums up my country, my party, and my life. Thank you all very much.